welcome to this episode of 10 Minutes, where we're going to be focusing on a developing story in the Great Lakes area. I'm Kayla Branch, and I'll be your host. Now, as international trade has increased exponentially in the last few decades, invasive species have spread far and wide, leaving destruction of native species, habitats, and overall biodiversity in their wake. Invasive species, which range from animals to plants, also cause billions in damages and occasionally bring with them diseases harmful to humans. Today we have individuals with us who have been directly impacted by invasive species, and we'll also be speaking with an expert scientist about what exactly are invasive species, how did it get this bad, and what you can do to help right after this commercial break.
Boat insurance.
And welcome back, folks. Joining us today, like I said earlier, are two individuals who have had recent experiences with one of the most common invasive species in America, the zebra mussel. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yes, so let's just start out by telling me a little bit about who you are and your experiences with the zebra mussel. So let's start with you.
Well, I've been a fisherman on the Great Lakes for the last 15 years. I do a lot of commercial and trophy fishing. I used to be catching about 20-foot pikes and at least 50 smallmouth bass every time I went out on the lake, but the last few years it seems like it's been dried up, so we got a little bit of a problem.
Right, sure. And what about you?
My name is Daniel, and I own the Monroe Nuclear Power Plant in Michigan on Lake Erie. But for the last few years, I've been having some serious problems with zebra mussels clogging pipes and causing me millions of dollars in damages.
Wow, okay, so you mentioned zebra mussels. What exactly is a zebra mussel?
Well, a zebra mussel is a small mollusk that actually has stripes, kind of similar to a zebra. Sort of looks like a clam a little bit, and they were introduced into our environment sometime within the mid-1980s, and ever since then they've been kind of taking over everything in the lake. You see them attaching themselves to surfaces, pipes, fish, everything out there, and it's becoming a big problem.
You had said that there's been some bad things happening to your business. Tell me about that. If something isn't done, what are some things we can maybe continue to see that are bad?
Right, well, zebra mussels form colonies on the inside of pipes, and so what will happen is they continue to block pipes in and out of my nuclear power plant, which obviously I use the water for cooling. And so when they block it out, I have to go in and it costs me millions of dollars to clean, clear, or add new pipes, whatever needs to be done. But if they do this and they get into the cooling system of the plant itself, then they can actually cause a nuclear meltdown into Lake Erie.
Wow.
Which would be a dramatic environmental disaster of epic proportions. So we need to make sure we get this fixed immediately.
I agree. And tell me a little bit, Shane, about what's happened to the local environment.
The local environment, so the zebra mussels are eating so many plankton in the water, which is such a big food supply for a lot of the other native species in the lake. So we've kind of seen a lack of fish. The fish aren't having enough food because of how much plankton and other organisms that the mussels are filtering. And additionally, with a lot of the fishermen, you see these mussels kind of getting within the ancient compartments of the cooling systems. And about a month ago, my boat up and exploded. So
Your boat exploded?
It's been a big problem.
Wow. So, well, I hope that they, will really focus in on this issue. Wow, keep us from a nuclear power plant explosion
Absolutely.
to more boat explosions. Were you okay? Did you have any injuries?
You know what? I ended up being okay. Just ended up with a small cut on my foot, actually, from stepping on one of them.
Wow.
They leave very sharp shells behind. You have to
Wow.
watch out for on the beach, especially.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Shane and Daniel, for sharing your stories with us. I really appreciate you taking the time. And folks at home, the zebra mussel is only one kind of invasive species. And up next, we are going to have Dr. Austin Sikora, a resident expert on invasive species, talk to us about different kinds of invasive species that are harmful not only to local economies and local environments, but human health as well, right after this commercial break. folks, thanks for tuning in with us, and welcome to Dr. Sakura. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
I'm always happy to come on and help explain to people about science and how great it is and all the wonders of the world.
Exactly. Well, we appreciate you doing that. Now, earlier in our show, we had two individuals who have really been struggling, in particular, with the zebra mussel. Now, let's start very basic. Tell me a little bit about what exactly an invasive species is.
So an invasive species is any type of non-native organism, whether it be plant or animal, that has been brought into a new environment other than its own, usually by way of human interactions in some form. And what makes it an invasive species is it inflicts some type of harm onto its new environment.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more about how invasive species, and maybe particularly zebra mussels, are transported.
Yeah, so the zebra mussel in particular is transported in ships' ballast waters.
Okay.
So ballast waters is in ships, they take in or discharge water to help with stability.
Okay.
And so when new cargo is being loaded or unloaded off of a ship, they discharge or add the water from the port that they are in. And so the problem is when they take up all this water, they also take up the organisms that live in the water. And so the zebra mussels, which are native to Eastern Europe and Western Russia, ships were taking up this water, and the zebra mussels would be mixed in the water. And so when they went to a new port, let's say in the United States, they would then discharge this water into this port, and then those zebra mussels would be introduced into the new environment.
Wow.
So for a lot of invasive species, they're introduced in a lot of our shipping, whether it be aquatic via the ballast waters or land via different cargoes that are just shipped across the country, whether it be with agriculture or other products being shipped.
Wow, okay. And now, Daniel and Shane from earlier touched on why, in fact, zebra mussels and other invasive species are a problem, but expand on that for me. Why is it a big deal that a fingernail-sized mollusk is introduced into the Great Lake region?
Yeah, so even though that they're so small, they have a great impact on the environment that they live in. And so, as they were talking about, they're filter feeders, so they filter out different things in the water, whether it be algae or plankton. And in filtering this, they're taking out food that other organisms require. So the lower animals in the food chain, the native species require that algae or plankton that's naturally in the water to feed off of. So whenever a new species is introduced that then also consumes the same thing, they're removing that vital food source for these native species. So whenever you take out a lower classification in a food web, it affects every other trophic above it. And so even if you're talking about small fish that then fed off of these algae and plankton, now we're talking about the fish that eat that fish and that eat that fish.
Right.
So affecting just one small part of the food web can have drastic effects on the entire food web. And also they're filter feeders, and so they change the turbidity of the water.
Okay.
And so in filtering the water, they're making it clear. And so these aquatic organisms that have adapted to live in these certain environments, in these lakes, have adapted to live in that specific turbidity, whether how clear the water is. So if it's naturally a more cloudy or murky lake, they don't need as much camouflage to hide them from other predators.
Oh, wow.
And so as we see the lakes become more clear, these fish and other organisms that naturally were kind of hidden within their environments that they've adapted to live in have now become more noticeable to their predators. And so they're not only being attacked from a food web sense of a lack of lower level organisms, but they're now being more vulnerable to the upper level species that prey upon them.
Wow.
And so it just has huge effects on these food webs and the biodiversity of the lakes.
For sure. And now, I had heard, I think at one point, that invasive species will come in and can breed really quickly. What is the case of that with zebra mussels in particular?
So zebra mussels breed very intensely. So one female within a year can produce anywhere from 100,000 to 500,000 eggs alone.
Wow.
And so when you're talking about a species that has been introduced into a new environment, it does not have native predators that prey upon it. And so whenever you have an organism that can produce in such exponential rates that then have no natural predators, it allows their populations to go unchecked. And so it then even further increases the effect it has on their environment.
Right. And now we heard earlier about some of the negative impacts, not just on biodiversity and the native species there, but on humans. On cut their feet, their boats explode. It clogs up the pipe systems at a nuclear power plant, among other things. Those are very serious things. And so what is being done about that right now at a policy level? And why is it that the government is kind of sticking its hand into the situation to help control it?
Yeah, so with something such as large a scale as this, so here's a map of the continental United States, and the red dots indicate all the areas that have been affected specifically by zebra mussels. And you can see that it is the entire Mississippi Basin. This is a scale that takes up a large portion of the United States, and so it needs kind of a national policy to be able to implement strategies to help prevent it from spreading even further. So throughout the United States specifically, there have been several federal agencies and programs that have put in place. So a large portion of the policy is aimed at kind of the shipping industry and how they operate to help prevent it. And then there are other more local programs in the lakes that then help prevent the spread of it within the lake once they've already kind of been introduced into these environments. And so on a more local scale, we see looking more at informing and teaching the natives of how they can best prevent the spread.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us. And you heard it here, folks. There are things that are being done on the national level, on the local level, and it's all about informing yourself, informing others to stop the spread of invasive species, to stop explosions, and to increase biodiversity. So make sure that you pay attention the next time that you go out to the lake or any body of water for a day of fun, and that you're doing it in a way that protects the environment and those around you. Thanks for tuning in to this show of 10 Minutes.